Let's talk about this federal deficit limit, which expires at midnight tonight. Is this merely symbolic, or is there something really important going on here?
Well, look, we're not going to fall down on the good faith and credit of the United States government. We're going to pay our debts, but I don't see the debt limit itself as the problem. The budget is the problem, and our debt is a problem. You know, we're talking about potential interest rate hikes today by the Fed, and I will tell you, every quarter point that we've seen in the last year is $50 billion of new interest. So the debt ceiling is just a matter of course. Until we get this total debt situation under control, we're going to have many more of these coming up unless we get it under control right now, David.
Well, and Senator, you make a very important point, which is an alarming percentage of our budget right now is taken up with servicing the existing debt. And that's when we've had historically low interest rates. What happens if if we return to what is called normal interest rates?
Well, this is what pulled me into this political game here. I mean, we have $20 trillion of debt. If interest rates go back to just their 30-year average of around 5%, we'd be paying $1 trillion in interest. Last year, we paid just a little over $200 billion of interest because interest rates were very low. So if the Fed goes up again today, we'll have 3 quarter-point increases in the last 15 months, which is another $150 billion of interest that we have responsibility for. This game is well past the tipping point of being a crisis. We've got to get serious about dealing with it.
Okay, so let's talk about what it means to get serious about dealing with it.
Yep.
What are the things that you think need to be done right away?
Well, the first thing is the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has laid out a 100-day plan that absolutely starts with the solution to this long-term problem of debt. We've got to get the economy going. Job one is to grow in the economy. Look, we're going to fix this tax system. I know there's a lot of debate about it right now, but the corporate tax rate is not competitive. We're the only country left in the OECD countries that has a repatriation tax, and our individual tax code is really screwed up. So we've got to deal with that, and that will get the economy going. At the same time, we're going to pull back on regulations and actually see a change in the way that we actually deal with those regulatory issues and the damage they do to the economy. The last is we're going to focus on fair trade. So these are things this president already has laid out. Look, we're going to get after debt, but we have to get the economy growing first.
So growth is one part of the solution, but
Yes.
having run a major corporation, a couple of major corporations actually, you know, and I learned certainly when I was in business, it's almost always both a top line problem and also a cost problem.
Oh,
It's
you got
awfully
it
hard to
right.
grow your way, just
Yep.
grow your way out of this problem. So what about
Yep.
the other side of it? What do we have to do at cost?
Well, you're so right. In these major turnarounds, and I've been involved in a couple of them, you can never just grow your way out. You can never just cut your way out. It's a combination of the above. And that's what Donald Trump's talking about. What we're talking about right now is the first thing of grow the economy, taxes, regulation, and energy. The second thing is we've got to fix the budget process. The budget process has not worked in 42 years since we put it into place in 1974. The third thing is we've really got to focus on excess spending in the federal government. Our government has grown from $2.4 trillion to $3.9 trillion under the last 2 presidents. Those are constant dollars. We've got to save Social Security and Medicare, and we've got to arrest the spiraling nature of health care costs. We get after those 5 areas, we'll go a long way to solving this debt crisis long term.
So, Senator, you pointed right at it, the so-called entitlements, because a lot of that growth in the federal budget that you've referred to actually came in entitlement programs, and yet the president thus far has really indicated he doesn't want to go after entitlements. Is he wrong?
Well, what he said is he doesn't want to take any benefits away from people receiving benefits, and I don't either. Nobody in the Republican Party does. But if we develop a long-term solution, which we have to, if we don't do anything, the trust funds of Social Security and Medicare go to zero in 15 short years. Both parties have been ignoring this for decades, and it's time we actually deal with that. But I don't think it's something we can do this year. I think we've got our plate full between taxes and regulation, trade, nominations and confirmations. So this is a phase 2 issue, and the president's even talked about that in his speech to Congress just a few weeks ago.
Well, when you talk about taxes, one of the issues that's come up is the so-called border adjustment tax, which some of your colleagues over in the House seem to be very smitten with. You have really said you don't think much of it. Don't you have to have a border adjustment tax in order to pay for some of the tax reforms that people are after?
Absolutely not. I mean, the only reason we're talking about a border adjustment tax is in order to pay for the real tax changes that will make a difference in the economy. The corporate tax rate reduction, the elimination of repatriation tax, and changing the individual tax rate to be much more meaningful. Those are things that will grow the economy. The border adjustment tax is regressive. It hammers low-income and middle-income consumers, and it does not foster growth. What it does do is grow central governments. When I saw this happen when I lived in Europe in the 70s, We saw that happen. Their governments grew over 2/3 in a decade after they put something very similar in back then. So this is not something we should be talking about. The only reason we're dealing with this now is in theory to pay for it under the current budget process, which I've just said is really not correct for turning this economy around.
But if we need those tax reforms, as you said, to really get the economy growing again, and you don't pay for them with a border adjustment tax, doesn't that leave only one alternative, which is to borrow more money, which is part of the problem?
Well, I'm not averse to borrowing more money in the short term if, in fact, over the long term, we see that turning the curve down on long-term debt. Look, in every turnaround I was a part of, and this is nothing different, this is an economic turnaround by the federal government, and Donald Trump is the right guy at the right time to break some eggs here in Washington and get us turned back in the right direction of innovation, capital formation, and the rule of law that will absolutely stimulate this economy. There are plenty of places in the federal government we can find to pay for the money to change these corporate tax rates. Let me give you some countries that just did this. The United Kingdom in 2009 eliminated their repatriation tax and reduced their corporate tax rate from 30 to 20. We can do the same thing. This is a game that's created by the budget process, which is absolutely broken.